Hey guys, what is up? Welcome to our second live show. We'll wait and see, let some people follow in here. But have to mention, just first and foremost, thanks for tuning in, and we can't wait to get some content coming out to you guys. Like I said in the comment that is pinned on our screen, we're going to talk about some things first, and then we'll take some questions later on. So we'll talk about obviously the Hunter Henry thing, Denzel Perryman leaving. Lots of changes coming to the Chargers, but I think the first place that we should start here really is the Hunter Henry departure and how that kind of affects things. So I was pretty surprised at when Hunter Henry signed with the Patriots, especially after they had signed Jonnu Smith. Alex, we'll start with you. What was your initial reaction to Hunter Henry signing with the New England Patriots?
I predicted that he wasn't coming back to the Chargers prior to free agency, but I was just like, it was shocking to me that they spent $12.5 million on Jonnu Smith and $12.5 million on Hunter Henry. Not exactly how I would have chosen to spend that money, but okay.
Right.
Throughout their first 2 days of free agency, they spent $45 million combined on Aguilar, Bourne, Henry, and Jonnu Smith. Which is not to say I don't like those guys. It's just like, I don't know if that was the best way to use money, but whatever. I think it's definitely a loss for the Chargers, like I wrote about today, but I had just been hedging on the idea of paying Hunter Henry a lot of money, 12.5 to 13 million for a guy who suffered some injuries, for a guy who, with the tight ends, it's really thin around the league. And unless you have one of three guys who, in my opinion, it's Kelsey, Kittle, and Waller, you don't really have a true difference maker. And I think that you can kind of replace a Henry with an Ertz. I think you can replace a Henry with a Rudolph and not experience too much drop off. So for the 12.5 to 13 million he wanted, I just never thought it was that worth it to pay him. I think it's a loss for the Chargers in the short term. And obviously, I think it would have been preferable to keep one of Justin Herbert's options that he's familiar with. But to me, replacing Hunter Henry isn't that hard. I think that you can get someone good and replace him. I don't think he's one of the tight ends that I put in the real top tier. You could say he's top 5 or top 10. But to me, there's really only 3 special tight ends in the league that, teams will have a really difficult time replacing.
Yeah, and that's kind of key there. Hunter Henry, if we're being honest, I know this isn't a great comparison, but he's kind of like Melvin Gordon, where he's injury bitten for many years, but not exactly the highest production, where his floor is pretty solid, but his ceiling is never really that high. And Gordon at most was solid, but he never had those like McCaffrey or Cook or Kamara kind of years. Hunter Henry isn't like that. And of course, what did they do? They made him, well, I don't know if they offered Henry anything, but they made Gordon, a low offer of what they thought was fair. Gordon didn't take it and he moved on. We don't know if they offered Henry anything. I assume they probably did. But it's clear that, that Telesco and Staley just didn't value him at this price because the price tag wasn't really that excessive. This is a little more than, what like a spot rack would have guessed, but it wasn't like, 14 million like we were thinking when Jonnu Smith signed. We figured, oh boy, he's going to be signing for, 13, 14 perhaps. So, plenty of guaranteed money. I think Daniel Popper referenced that the guarantee that he got was like 60 something % of the entire contract. So it's clear that they really wanted him. And, getting 60, between 60 and 70% of your contract guaranteed is incredible. So my question was, what was the plan with Hunter Henry then? And was this more Staley driven? Because, last season they tag him. And what was your purpose? What was your plan after that year? Because last year when they tagged him, their goal was to win a championship with Tyrod Taylor and then move on. What was the plan there? So I actually think, and he had his best season, if not for COVID. So it's not like he underperformed and then they let him go. So what was the plan then from Telesco's standpoint last season? And did that change going into this season with Staley? And I think it did. And that goes back to your point in your research, Stephen, about the different kinds of tight ends that they had or that they're looking for, that these coaching staff has. So I don't know. I'm really curious to see we'll never know, I guess. But I wish I knew what this plan was last year going into this year, because all Henry did was kind of exceed expectations, minus the fact that he missed a couple of games, and they let him go for a price tag that was relatively fair. So I'm curious how much Staley's influence was a part of this.
Well, you also mentioned the, coaching staff potentially being the change. Something that I remembered that I thought was interesting was Daniel Popper reported before the pandemic last year that they were relatively close on an extension with Hunter Henry. And then the pandemic came, and that changed everything, right? So, I don't know if that was fully the reason, but that's something that I think is interesting to bring up in addition to the coaching staffs.
Yeah, so for those who are just joining us, we are talking about Hunter Henry leaving and just kind of our initial reaction there. To me, like the coaching fit was just a little weird for me. Like I said in my research that I was looking up, and all these coaches that the Chargers have compiled, they've all had, these yards after catch guys. And then you look at, Pro Football Focus and other advanced stats, and Hunter Henry, was 13th this year in yards after catch, and his yards per catch per reception average was not very good. And you look at like Gronk had a higher average in both of those departments, and it was just, someone just commented that Henry was not explosive, and that's just been kind of the common thread here. So, the Patriots thing, man, like I was shocked honestly, because they're paying, Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry a combined $25 million or $26 million, excuse me, to be their two tight ends. And then they paid Nelson Aguilar like a number one right receiver. And then they paid Kendrick Bourne like a number two receiver. So it's going to be interesting. The one thing I'll say though, like, I don't know how much, they're invested in Cam Newton long term. I don't know what their plan is there. But the easiest way for them to make things easier for Cam Newton is to give him two tight ends over the middle and give him some big body targets that could take pressure off of him. And so they went and did that. I just didn't think they would do that, especially after they drafted two tight ends in the third round last year. So, Bill Belichick's spending spree this week has just been so weird to watch because they've never done this. And, I was having this conversation in our Bolt Beat chat today, but it's like, the man clearly did not like missing the playoffs, and they were in contention right up until the last couple of weeks for the playoff hunt, and everybody's kind of throwing them under the bus and saying that they're not going to be a playoff team. I think they're going to be a playoff team next year. I really do. If Cam's able to stay healthy and they're able to get these pieces back on defense, I think Dante Hightower coming back from his opt out is huge for them. Mm-hmm. We'll have to see what happens with Stephon Gilmore and J.C. Jackson and stuff like that, but. I would expect the Patriots back in the playoff hunt, and it just was weird to see that spending spree this week.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing I'll say in regards to Hunter Henry is, like, I think it's clear he kind of wanted to leave and go to New England. People post that picture of Belichick hugging him at the end of the game. But, aside from that, Belichick has known him since, he was a kid through his coach. So at that point, if the Chargers had an offer that matched what the Patriots were giving him, 3 years, 37.5, and that's about as high as I was willing to go for Henry, maybe 4 years, 50 at the most, basically what Jonnu Smith got. And that was as high as what I was willing to go. And if he was like, hey, I want to go to New England and be with Belichick and that's what I want to do, then I don't think there's anything really that the Chargers could have done other than pay him so much money that he couldn't turn it down, which I just think is not a smart thing to do when you're talking about a tight end like Henry.
Yeah, I mean, and that's free agency. They are unrestricted free agents for a reason. If John Johnson wanted to go to the Browns, which is hilarious saying that, but if John Johnson wanted to go to the Browns and he did, that's where he went. I saw a couple people on Twitter saying, "Oh, the Chargers didn't do anything." Like, we don't really know that. We don't really know they didn't try to make some sort of offer. If he wanted to go there, if Henry wanted to go play for the Patriots, which is understandable, go for it. They certainly offered him enough money to go there. Tons of guaranteed money, like Andrew said.
Yeah, so, I mean, Daniel Popper was saying on his live stream yesterday that he thinks that they probably offered him the Austin Hooper deal, which I think was 4 for $40 or something like that, in that range. So, I mean, like you said, we'll never know. But I just think, it wasn't really like a long-term fit. And so with the coaching change, what happened?
Up to the Panthers.
Oh yeah, that was one of your guys, your last remaining guys.
One
So-
year deal for $8 million.
That's it.
That's $8 million max.
Oh my gosh!
For a guy with what do you have? It's like 60
Leonard Floyd got
pressures.
$65 million, and Reddick had a better season.
Reddick
What
had
is
65
happening?
pressures, 13 sacks, 34 run stops. They just got him for $8 million, 1 year deal.
What in the world? That
doesn't make me happy.
is frustrating. That does not make any sense to me.
Well, at least they have Mike Williams.
Oh gosh.
Could have signed
All
two
right,
Reddicks.
let's go back to the Hunter Henry thing, because I think, obviously, we've got to talk about how they're going to replace him. The popular name, and I'm in favor of this, depending on the cost, is Zach Ertz, right? It was reported on Monday that the Eagles were seeking out a 3rd round pick. I'm not in favor of that. That is way too high for Zach Ertz. And then the next day it came out that the Eagles had given permission to Ertz to seek out a trade on his own. So to me, that says that, the Eagles were not getting the kind of compensation that they are hoping for. And so to me, that means that they could be looking at a lesser offer. But that is the latest on Zach Ertz. And then the other thing to mention as well here, he's not looking for a contract extension right away. Obviously, that would kind of depend on the team and whether or not they have those conversations. But, you could theoretically only trade him, trade a 5th round pick for 1 season of Zach Ertz, and then see what kind of development you get out of Donald Parham, out of Steven Anderson, potentially if you bring back, and a rookie. So that's the options with Zach Ertz. I'll kind of shift this over to Alex, because Alex is the resident Eagles fan here and Zach Ertz truther. Where do you stand on trading for Zach Ertz right now, especially knowing that you could potentially only be getting him for 1 season? And what kind of cost would you be giving up to get him?
I mean, that's the risk, but for me, I would be willing to give up a 4th or 5th round pick for him. I think that that's a reasonable range. 3rd is a little bit high for me. Then again, they do have the 2 compensatory. They have the compensatory 3rd as well. I would probably go 4th as kind of my highest offer. I'm not sure the Eagles are going to get a deal for him. I know they talked about that, but there were also reports prior to this week that they were considering just straight up releasing him. And if they were to do that, he would just be a free agent. I would swing a deal for a 4th round pick. I think if that's where you're talking about taking a tight end anyway, and you already have the 2 extra picks, what you could theoretically do is trade for Ertz, and then you have Parham and Anderson, and then presumably you could draft a tight end in, like, I don't know, the 3rd round, the 5th round, whatever you want to do. I think that that's a reasonable plan for tight end if you want to replace Hunter Henry. If you don't want to give up any capital, then what you could do is sign Kyle Rudolph, right? Then you don't have to trade a draft pick. You could go after Jared Cook, right? We talked about him. But for me, I just think Ertz heads into kind of above what's available in free agency right now. While I like Kyle Rudolph, it's like Ertz is a 3-time Pro Bowler, Super Bowl champion before this year, when he had the worst quarterback play in the league, and was out for 5 games. So I just don't. I think Zach Ertz is better than a lot of Chargers fans give him credit for. And I think that he's a very natural replacement for Hunter Henry. You can play him this year and then see where it goes. And in the meantime, still develop your Parham, still develop your other guys, and you could probably still take a Tommy Tremble or Hunter Long, whatever you want to develop in the draft.
The longer Telesco waits to sign other players, I don't mean big name players, I just mean depth guys, the further back I want to give up a pick for Zach Ertz. Now, I like the idea of giving up a late pick, a day 3 pick for Ertz. I just don't know about a 4th or even a 5th at this point, because A, I think there's going to be some good talent there anyway, and B, this roster is pretty barren right now. We just saw 2 linebackers, Nick Vigil and Denzel Perryman, go elsewhere, and now you might need that 5th round pick. You might need both of those 6th round picks. You might need right now. Telesco needs to use and probably hit on most of his picks in this draft, because there's a serious lack of talent and a serious lack of depth right now. And so if they can make a few more moves, now granted, if they sign some players, they have less money. So trading for Ertz and getting that contract isn't really great. But right now, if they don't get like a Troy Hill, they don't get a Anthony Harris or something, some of these, not necessarily depth guys, but just some more players on their roster, then I would rather just kind of, get like a Kyle Rudolph instead and just save that pick for the help that they're going to need, because they're going to need it. And the theme of their offseason meeting so far, aside from some of the bigger names like Radunes and Samuel, is looking for guys that can help both on special teams and, you know, do a certain like running backs and DBs on day 3. And you're just going to give that up now for Ertz when I don't know. I'm not really liking it so far. If Telesco can sign a few more guys, he can take out another contract. I know that doesn't really make sense, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, no, I understand that completely, because, you know, right now there are a lot of holes on this roster, man. They don't really have any, you know, linebacker depth whatsoever. I mean, unless you're really into like Emeka Egbule and the kid from Army, I forget his name, Christiansen. BJ Bello is still still a restricted free agent. So, and he was their best special teams player last year. So I totally understand that. I think my preference right now, while I would be in favor of trading for Zach Ertz if it was an affordable cost, I would prefer Kyle Rudolph, and then, you know, drafting somebody like a Trey McKitty or a Kenny Yeboah, or obviously the dream right now in the draft is Tommy Tremble. But, you know, Rudolph is a better blocker than Ertz. I mean, they're probably equally as athletic at this point. You know, Kyle Rudolph had better yards after catch numbers than Zach Ertz last year and the year before that. Obviously, Zach Ertz in 2019 had way more targets and way more opportunities, but, you know, in yards after catch per reception, Kyle Rudolph is the better player in that regard. And so you can probably get Rudolph for super cheap, you know, maybe like a 2-year, I don't know, like $12-14 million deal, and then you don't have to give up a pick and worry about a Zach Ertz extension. And so I think my preference right now would be Kyle Rudolph and a day 3 pick. I am not interested at all whatsoever in Jared Cook. I do not want that to happen at all. The man looks completely zapped of any athleticism last year. Just not into that idea. Other than that, I mentioned Mercedes Lewis today as a blocking tight end. That man is 37 years old and is probably the second best blocking tight end in the league from what I watched today on film. And then you can kind of, you know, deal with the receiving vacancy with Donald Parham, Steven Anderson, and another, you know, potential rookie or something like that. But, you know, I would lean towards Rudolph and Mercedes Lewis at this point.
Yeah, and, you know, people are saying in the chat potentially Parham or Anderson as T1. I like both of those guys. I've been high on the upside of Parham. I just don't think you can go into
not
next
as tight
year.
end 1.
Yeah, not as tight end 1. Like, if you want to put Parham as tight end 2, you know, you upgrade him from tight end 3 to tight end 2. I'm fine with that next year. But I don't think you can go into day 1. As much as I love Parham's physical attributes, you know, he played like how many snaps last year? Not many. And, you know, he came on for a couple snaps a game. Like, I just don't think you can elevate him all the way to TE1 by doing that.
No, nor should they. Again, I have to repeat. I repeat this almost every episode, it feels like. But guys, it was 10 receptions, and some of them were cool, but it was 10 receptions. While I'm thinking of underperforming and some fan hype, guys, Easton Stick threw 4 interceptions in the preseason against 3 third stringers. Okay, please no. He had a passer rating of like 44. If that were Justin Herbert in the preseason, we would have never seen him the entire year if Tyrod Taylor wasn't stabbed. Like, if Justin Herbert went out and threw 4 interceptions against third stringers, we would have never seen him last year. And granted, you're asking for Stick for a backup role, not the starting quarterback at the Los Angeles Chargers. But boy, let's pump the brakes, y'all. I know some of y'all are just having fun with it, and that's cool. I get it. I was a Bobby Holly guy, so I'm not gonna judge you there. But yeah, let's pump the brakes on that one. Speaking of underperforming Chargers.
Oh man, the Easton Stick thing, I'm not into it, man. We just don't know enough. Like, that's the thing, is like, to me, you know, somebody said this to me, that Justin Herbert doesn't need like the mental help of having a veteran quarterback. If you can't see the benefit of adding a veteran into a quarterback room where your oldest quarterback is a 3rd-year quarterback and Easton Stick is 25, you know, to me, and especially with a coaching change, like, Justin is going to have some questions that the coaches cannot all answer. Like, he's going to have to lean on somebody, you know, and he's talked about how Tyrod has helped him last season with everything, especially when once he was back on the field. I just think, you know, from a mental and a preparation standpoint, adding that veteran is going to be crucial for Justin Herbert. Somebody mentioned CJ Beathard in the chat. That works for me too, because he's not like a super old guy, but he's very familiar with Shane Day. He's very familiar with the system. I don't think they're bringing back Nick Mullins, the Niners, that is. So Nick Mullins would be another one. He probably costs a little more than CJ Beathard, but you know, a lot of the higher end, you know, backup options are now signed. So, you know, you still have Alex Smith, and a lot of people thought that he could get, you know, a potential starting job. It doesn't look like that's going to be the case. So I know Alex is a little worried about the on-field thing, but from a preparation standpoint, I think Alex Smith would make a lot of sense. Jeff Friday mentioned Chase Daniel. He's not been released yet, but Chase Daniel, I mean, he's been, you know, one of the funniest stories of all time, because he just keeps getting paid, but he never gets on the field. But Chase Daniel, I think, would make a lot of sense, because he's been with Joe Lombardi. He knows that system, and you know, he's done everything mentally to that could benefit Justin Herbert. And so for me, like, you got to add a veteran backup at some point, and I think they will. They'll bring in somebody else, because they're not going to go into training camp with 2 quarterbacks. You know, they traditionally bring in 4, so they'll probably bring in, you know, a lower tier veteran, and then, you know, do an undrafted free agent potentially as like another developmental guy, like we saw with Cardell Jones. But you know, it's not going to be Easton Stick as, you know, the anointed backup quarterback 2 already. Like, they're going to bring in some competition, because that's just what they've always done.
Yeah, I mean, I like Easton Stick well enough. Like, I mean, he seems like a nice guy. But, you know, he did have a bad preseason, and he hasn't played football in 2 years. Like, how are you just going to be like, you know, it doesn't even have to be a situation like Justin Herbert tears his ACL. Like, if that happens, the season's over. But what if something happened, like the Raiders game, right? The Raiders game, Derek Carr goes down. Marcus Mariota comes in, and he plays at a serviceable enough level. Now, I'm not saying you have to spend Marcus Mariota money, but if you can pay a quarterback, you know, let's say between $1 and $4 million, who, you know, is good enough to at least, you know, just finish out a game, that can be really important. And if it wasn't for the Raiders secondary being total dog shit at the time, and them firing their defensive coordinator, they would have won that game with Marcus Mariota. So I do think there is value to having, you know, a backup, even if you hope, you know, ultimately that they never have to see the field because of Justin Herbert. And the other thing for me, yeah, like you mentioned, there's a lot of cheap, affordable backups. There's Joe Flacco, there's Alex Smith. And, you know, to the point of experience, Justin Herbert is 1 year older than me, and I'm kind of stupid, I'm going to be honest. So I think that I think that, you know, you can get a lot of wisdom by just having someone who's played a bunch of games. You know, seems like something that's kind of just intuitive. You know, so again, it's not something that, like, I don't like Easton Stick. It's just like, yeah, he has improved, and I have to see it really with my own eyes. You know, maybe he'll get a preseason this year to try to prove himself and how much he's improved. Maybe he wins the starting quarterback job. But he has to win it first. Like, like Steven said, I don't feel comfortable anointing him and then having, you know, the last life reserve for the Chargers being Easton Stick. You know, another guy that I'll mention is Geno Smith. He's a free agent right now, was recently the Seahawks backup, Chargers backup in 2018. Tyler's rolling his eyes. But Geno Smith, I mean, he's played in a bunch of games. I mean, and was a starter for a while. So, like, I do think there's something to that, where it's just like, it doesn't need to be, you know, I love Jacoby Brissett, but he signed in Miami for however many million. You don't have to pay a guy a ton of money. Like, I just think you bring in a guy either to compete with Stick, or you bring in a guy to be the backup for a low cost. That's really all I think it's about. Yeah.
Even if, like, we're doomed anyway if Justin Herbert goes down. So bring in someone with experience, because right now the only guy he can look at is Easton Stick. And, you know, hey, Easton, you know, what was it like being in a football game? He's going to go, well, I ran forward for 4 yards once, and like that was it. So I might have taken a gadget snap once. Speaking of Raiders, you mentioned Raiders a while ago. They signed Solomon Thomas to a 1-year deal for $5 million. Obviously a first-round bust, but I just kind of wish the Chargers would take a couple more swings, maybe not at $5 million, but a couple more swings on some guys that didn't quite make it, but had a lot of talent. And Adoree Jackson is on the market right now from a first-round pick. So I would like them to take some sort of swing there, because if you think you have good coaching, maybe these guys stink. I don't know. Maybe when they evaluate them, they're like, oh God, this is just not worth it anymore. This is unsavable. But, you know, if Telesco can take shots on guys from the CFL or the XFL and they have panned out, why not take a shot on some guys with a lot of talent at one point in their life that are younger and, give them a shot. And for him to go to the Raiders, they're still going to suck, but at least they're trying to do something. So I'm not. Yeah, go for it.
The Raiders are just like, they're so poorly run right now. And, they spent all this money on the offensive line. It was their best unit. And now they're blowing it up. And they were going to release Gabe Jackson. Now they're trying to trade him. By not releasing him, they now have to pay him all his money. Like, his money becomes guaranteed now. So that was just a dumb mistake. Trading Roddy Hudson, arguably the second or third best center in the league, or even the best center in the league. Like, what are you doing? And I saw some Raiders writers were like, well, they weren't winning any games anyway. But it's like, you have a great offensive line. Your floor is 7 wins. Like,
yep.
For the Raiders, you got to take that. Like, that's, for a team that's traditionally been winning 4 and 5 games the last few years, now to say, well, 7 wins isn't good enough. So, what's the point?
Also, am I mistaken, or is this the same Raiders team that started like 6-3 and 6-4? Like, the Raiders have been playing decent football. I mean, look, they collapsed down the stretch last year because their defense became a tire fire with injuries and all that. But like, they weren't all that far away last year to at least being a playoff contender. I mean, there was a big Sunday night football game where, they came in and went tit for tat with the Chiefs. They were, before the Buccaneers, they were the only team to beat the Chiefs. Like, that is an accomplishment.
I remember after they lost that game to the Chiefs, dude, everybody was talking about them being like a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah.
And so, talking about it being like the best loss of all time. I'm like, okay, pump the brakes. Like, let's relax.
Yeah, the idea that they're this far away, like that's just something I don't understand from the Raiders writers. But no, I mean, going back to what were we just talking about? Oh, we were talking about Jackson. We were talking about Dory Jackson. Yeah, I like Adoree Jackson. I like Troy Hill is another option that's still out there. Yeah. I think there's quite a few CB options. I'm curious to see if they're going to sign another guy or if they're going to go maybe through the draft. I don't know if they're going to go for the first 2 rounds and pair one of those guys with Michael Davis. Mackenzie Alexander is a guy I actually like a little bit from Cincinnati. He was the other corner there other than William Jackson, and I thought he was pretty good. So I wouldn't mind signing him to maybe a 1 or 2 year type deal. But yeah, there's still a lot of movement for free agency for sure.
Yeah, the cornerback market and the edge market has pretty much dried up. If they want to add a secondary piece, like Daniel Palmer mentioned Anthony Harris, I think that would make a lot of sense. Somebody who can do some slot safety versatility. Obviously, Troy Hill. I would love Adoree Jackson signing, man. I think he in his first 3 years really showed signs of being like a premier corner, and the dude is an athletic freak, and so you get Adoree Jackson and Michael Davis on the bookend corners. That's some high-end athleticism that the Chargers haven't had in a very long time at the cornerback position, right? Because it's always been like, Antonio Cromartie and Quentin Jammer. Like, you get one high-end athlete and then one kind of lockdown guy. But, in a division with the Chiefs and even the Raiders who have Henry Ruggs, like, you got to have speed. You got to have, premier athleticism. And I think Adoree Jackson and Michael Davis would give them that. And I think you could get him for pretty cheap right now and be able to, like Tyler said, take a first round talent kind of guy and, rejuvenate his career. Because if you take a shot on Adoree Jackson, turn him into that premier corner, then you look like a freaking genius. Like, your team's getting all kinds of praise because you took a chance on a guy and you turn him into a truly effective starter. And I think that makes a lot of sense.
Can I ask a dumb question? Is Michael Davis the corner 1?
Yeah.
Right now, yeah.
Well, right now, sure. But I mean, like, do they actually view him like that?
Daniel Palmer seems to think that Chris Harris Jr. is going to be an outside corner in this system. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much I buy that personally. But I mean, I like Chris Harris, but I think Michael Davis right now on the roster is cornerback 1. And I think, it's going to be really interesting to see how they attack the draft, because we all want a cornerback in the second round, especially, if it's Asante Samuel Jr. And Michael Davis is the cornerback 1. That's a little scary for me. I like Michael Davis a lot, but I think he's best suited as a number 2 cornerback right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think Michael Davis is going to be the cornerback 1 next year. Whether he's that going forward is kind of a different question, right? Like if they wanted to go in the first round and they were like, hey, we're going to take Patrick Surtain or someone like that, or Caleb Farley, right? Then in that case, it's like, okay, then that guy is probably your eventual CB1 in all reality. But it doesn't sound like that, there's no free agent corner that would really go over Michael Davis. And I don't think there's a draft corner, maybe Asante Samuel Jr. in the second round that eventually eclipses him. But I don't think there's many other guys in the draft that would, within the next 2 or 3 years, really overtake Michael Davis.
Yeah. So the last thing we're going to talk about here. So I'm going to tell you guys right now, we are going to give away a free agent jersey. Whether that is Corey Linsley, if that's your choice, or Matt Filer, or whoever else they sign, we are going to give away a jersey. So the instructions for how you enter are going to be very simple. You're just going to comment right now, Corey Linsley, the full name typed, and that will count as your entry. Okay, so obviously that doesn't mean you have to do the full name, Corey Linsley, full name, not just Linsley. Okay, so that's going to be your entry for our jersey giveaway. We're going to talk about the Mike Williams thing, and then we will take some questions after that. So if you want an entry into the jersey, you have to type the full name, Corey Linsley. All right, so Mike Williams, obviously his contract is now fully guaranteed. They can still come to an agreement with an extension with him. That would obviously lower the cap hit. I don't know why some people were thinking that he was going to be cut. I never thought that was going to be a possibility, especially once Hunter Henry signed with the Patriots. He became that much more important. So do both of you still feel like he plays this season on the option, or do you think that they will get an extension done? Just kind of your general thoughts on Mike Williams.
I feel that he plays this season on the option. I mean, there's not a lot of motivation for Mike Williams to sign a contract extension unless he thinks he's going to really play bad because of the system, or he's going to, if he's concerned about injury, that's another thing. But his baseline really going forward, because of his size, because of his intangibles, even if he has 600 yards and 3 touchdowns next year, it's probably still like 8, 9, 10 million, right? So if that's kind of the low point that he's taking right now, and say the Chargers agree with him on a 4-year, $40 million extension, why would he take that right now, right? Like that's kind of the thing, if that's going to be the baseline offer for a bad year next year anyway. And you can play yourself if, Mike Williams has 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. Yeah, he probably plays himself into a $13 to $15 million deal. So that's kind of the thing about Mike Williams taking an extension. There were a lot of people today on Twitter that I guess thought they were going to cut Mike Williams. Like, I don't know where people got that idea from, because if you've been listening to our show, we've been saying that they were going to keep Mike Williams the whole time, and then people are on our Twitter like, I can't believe Tom Toledo did this. Like, this is what he was going to do. I really didn't understand that. But the other thing for me is, keeping Mike Williams at $15 million, like, sure, that's a bad cap hit for 1 year. But guess what? They still have $20 or $25 million in cap space to work with, and they're probably not done spending in free agency. And that $20 million figure accounts for the rookie contracts they'll have to sign. So, they still have plenty of money left to work with. If you want to do a Zach Ertz trade and 3 other moves, you can still do that. Like that's the whole point. And teams have been showing us that there's creative ways for cap hits. The Chiefs signing Joe Thuney to an $80 million deal. To figure out what you want to do with the cap. So, and Mike Williams, look, the options for replacing him, if you were to cut him, what are they? Right? Okay, if you want to sign Kenny Golladay or Juju Smith-Schuster, okay, so you're going to pay 1 year for $15 million of that, or you're going to promise them more money for a longer term. So that's not an answer. If you want to cut Mike Williams and draft a receiver, guess what? You're probably not going offensive line in round 1, or you have to go wide receiver round 2 at the earliest in that situation. Like, I just don't think there was a good way to move on from Mike Williams this offseason. I still think he's a relatively productive receiver, and you see where you are next year. If Mike Williams has a bad year, try to move on from him. If Mike Williams has a good year, you sign him to an extension. Or, like people have said, there's a possibility at least that Mike Williams signs an extension this offseason, although I think that's unlikely. But yeah, I think Mike Williams is a good player to have. And, I got into this with people on Twitter today, but, the best option is keeping him and figuring it out later.
Yeah.
We've already talked about they have to replace Nick Vigil. They have to replace Denzel Perriman. They have to replace Hunter Henry. They have to do all these things. Why are you adding, another
Another hole, yeah.
Another hole on a list of shit that you already have to fix. It's like if I had a bunch of shit to renovate in my house and then I just decided to break the refrigerator. Like there's something about that. I just, I think you figure out what you want to do with Mike Williams later, and that's
the analogies, man. The analogies are cracking me up.
Yeah, I'm gonna be the Colin Cowherd today.
Nice. That's great. If I'm being honest, a guy who hasn't been quite that productive, who self-admittedly does not care about his own body, is probably not worth extending as is. And he is not worth his cap hit this year. He is not worth $20,000 less than Keenan Allen. But I think they're just going to eat it. Yeah. And now that Hunter Henry is gone, I always thought it was kind of the opposite. If you lose Mike Williams, Hunter Henry becomes necessary. Clearly, the opposite has happened, and it's pretty clear that Mike Williams is going to be on the team this year. So, I think it's necessary to hang on to him for one more year. I do think the need for wide receiver is bumped up now, and again, that's another reason why you can't just trade for Ertz, because you might need that fourth. I mean, you grab Des Fitzpatrick in the fourth. He's probably going to go earlier, but say you get him in the fourth, I think that's worth it as his eventual replacement. So I think it's going to stink to bite it for a year. And look, if he does really well, awesome. He probably won't come back anyway. Sign a fat contract somewhere else. Give me that comp pick. Aren't we all loving these mock drafts with an extra third? Not that I don't think Mike Williams will give you that, but like, that's kind of fun, isn't it? This whole new compensatory pick thing. Maybe that's the analytic, whatever route that they want to go. Maybe that's kind of why they let Hunter now, because then they have Lindsay and Filer. But still, like, I think it works for this year. You don't have Henry. And I think it'll work for next year when you eventually let him go and you find somebody else, because the guy, again, admittedly does not care about his own body. He wants to get the football, and that's great. But he doesn't care if he lands on his shoulder, and separates it and is out for the year, which he seems to do almost every single game. I don't know how he comes back in the games the following week.
Yeah.
That's just, if Hunter Henry was already a risk as is because of his injuries, I feel like his were kind of more a freak injuries, a guy that, lacerates his kidney because someone hit him in the back. Like, what are you going to do? Like, it's not something that's just a random act of craziness. Williams actively almost goes out of his way to hurt himself. And I just don't think you can extend that. Granted, it does lower the cap hit this year, but then again, what are the other Chargers going after a big name guy? Not necessarily. So you could lower the cap hit this year, but it's not like they're, trying to go and win free agency right now. So it's not like you really need that cap. So yeah, I do think while he is totally not worth his cap hit this year, he is going to play on it, and it is what it is. Let him walk next year, whether he does poorly or does really well or really does about the same. Like, I just think he's going to be gone.
Two updates. Kenny Galladay is expected to sign with the Giants. Kyle Long is signing with the Chiefs.
Yeah, I just saw the Kyle Long thing. Kyle Long is going to be an All-Pro next year because that's how things work, because he signed with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's going to be an amazing player, and that's going to not be very fun watching that happen. But the Chiefs are going for it, man. And, they were in on the Williams all the way to the end. And everybody was talking about, like, how do they have space? How do they have space? They restructured a shit ton of deals. They released both of their tackles. And Joe Thuney has a $990,000 cap hit next year because he signed like a $20 million signing bonus or whatever. So, the Chiefs have space and they're making moves, obviously. And I think Kyle Long is a good signing for them, unfortunately. But they're going to be fine. Everybody was kind of, pushing the panic button and saying that the Chiefs are going to be bad next year. They're going to be fine. They are going to win the AFC West next year. They're going to win 13, 14 games, and they'll probably be back in the Super Bowl. So just so everybody knows that. As for Mike Williams, man, like, I think a lot of the frustration from, myself included and others comes from the fact that they drafted him in the first round. They drafted him in the top 10, and he hasn't really become more than a jump ball player. And I understand that frustration, but this Tom Telesco loves Mike Williams. Daniel Popper has repeatedly said that he is very highly regarded inside that building. and it makes a lot of sense. He's a warrior, and he fights through all these injuries, and he gets, he battles on the field, and I think that's important. I would love to see him evolve more as a player, and I would love to see some more separation skills. There was reports last offseason saying that he was a better route runner. We didn't really see that very much. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But he's going to get more targets this year because Hunter Henry is gone. Even if you sign Kyle Rudolph's not getting Hunter Henry's 90 targets. Zach Ertz, maybe. But, Mike Williams is going to get more targets, and I think he's going to be more productive. So if he has a really good season, shows some progression as a route runner, then they can keep him, and then they can bring him back. If not, then like Tyler said, then they let him leave and hopefully get a compensatory pick. So that being said, guys, we'll take some questions here. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat. Somebody's already asked Villanueva or Riley Reef. I would take Reef. I'm not super interested in Alejandro Villanueva. I just have never really been super impressed with him. And I think he's going to command, $12-13 million, and I don't think he's worth that. I think you could probably get Riley Reef for 7 or 8, and I think they're probably in a very similar tier, very similar abilities. So I would say give me Riley Reef if that's the case, but I would much prefer taking a first-round rookie because that's just way cheaper and probably better, honestly.
Right. I think the thing with Reef, though, that I like about him, and this could also be true with Villanueva, I suppose, is if you sign him to a 1-year deal, right? Let's say you sign Riley Reif to 1 year, $8 million. That doesn't really take him out or, make him the full-time starter, right? I guess, if you still draft, Rashawn Slater, Elijah Vera Tucker, if you still draft Christian Darrisaw, like you could probably, see whoever wins in training camp and then go from there. With Villanueva, if you're signing him to a 1 year, $12 to $15 million deal, he's probably the starter there at the very least for the whole year, just because of his salary would command that, unless he were to get hurt or something. So I think that's really the difference between the two. So that's also kind of why I would prefer Reif. And like Steven said, I don't think they're that different in quality to the point where I'm paying an extra $6 or $7 million for Alejandro Villanueva.
I'm trying to find the snap counts, but Alejandro Villanueva, 43 pressures last season. So I don't know if I'm paying a guy the second left tackle on the market money for 43 pressures. And when Riley Reif gave up 21 on 1,000 snaps himself. So yeah, I mean, because that kind of answers my question. If you're 22 snap pressures better, I'm going with you.
Yeah. And Riley Reif is going to be much, much cheaper. And so, I think that's a signing that probably could happen this weekend if they go after it. But my personal preference would still be to beef up the interior offensive line. If Gabe Jackson is available, I'm not too interested in trading for Gabe Jackson. That kind of seems what the Raiders are hoping for. Similar conversation to Zach Ertz, right? I think, obviously you could get Gabe Jackson, and his long-term deal done. He's signed for next year as well. But I just think, you could sign a Larry Warford. You could sign, another depth signing. Somebody asked about Forrest Lamp and Dan Feeney. They're Forrest Lamp, him playing all 100% of the snaps last year was huge for him, just like mentally, I think. But, I think if I'm bringing back, any of the 3 starters last year in a reserve role, I think I could make an argument that Forrest Lamp, there's still a lot of untapped potential there because of the injuries. So, I wouldn't hate him being the one holdover starter, but I think it's going to be Dan Feeney, unfortunately. But I still would like to see them beef up the interior offensive line with a Larry Warford, a Nick Easton kind of type, and then be able to draft a tackle at number 13. So like I said, the Raiders have not officially released Gabe Jackson. It seems like their plan is going to be to try and trade him, which was really foolish of them. Okay, so somebody asked about Kyle Pitts again. I'll entertain your thought. The Chargers take Kyle Pitts at 13 if he's there. I don't think he's going to be there. But if they take him at 13, the problem with that approach, and I've been saying this, at 13, you have the chance of maybe getting the second best offensive lineman, if that's Rashawn Slater. If not, you can get the third best, Elijah Vera Tucker or Christian Darrisaw. If you pass on an offensive lineman in the first round to take Kyle Pitts, who is a fantastic player, definitely feels a need at this point. In the second round, then you're likely looking at, a James Hudson, a Brady Christensen, Alex Leatherwood type of player to be your starting left tackle from day one. And that's just not really something that I personally am interested in. We look at all these teams who need offensive line help in a very deep offensive line class. There's going to be, 10 to 12 players who get drafted before, in terms of offensive linemen, who before the Chargers pick at 47. So if you're willing to take the risk of passing on the second or third best lineman in favor of the 13th or 14th best lineman, then sure, take Kyle Pitts. If you're not, then you take an offensive lineman at 13. And that's the biggest thing for me. Same thing at cornerback as well, right? You take the second or third best cornerback at 13, then you have to do the offensive lineman. If you do it in reverse, you could still get the fourth or fifth best cornerback in the second round. Offensive line, you're probably choosing between the 14th, 15th, maybe 13th if you're lucky. That's my rant.
Okay, good. That's very nice.
I was waiting for Tyler. To speak because he hasn't spoken in a while, so I wanted to give him a chance.
I can't speak. Yeah, no. I responded to the wrong tweet about this, but someone asked me about Pitts is a generational talent. I responded to the wrong tweet, but like I said, so is Justin Herbert, and I'd like to take my kids to see him one day, and I want him to be protected by the best offensive line possible. And if you take Leatherwood, who I don't think is really much of a tackle as is, and you take him in the second round, he's probably your left tackle for a few years. Are you going to invest a first round pick the following year in a left tackle because you reached in the second round and you blew it on that pick? Or are you going to sign, Trent Williams just asked for $23 million a year. Are you going to sign a super expensive left tackle next year? No. Do you want Sam Tevy back? No. I mean, not in a starting role at least.
No,
sure, as a
starting role.
Fine. And like you said, the draft plays so much better. And for everyone talking about Kyle Pitts, watch Brevin Jordan, guys. Like, I don't understand. Kyle Pitts isn't the only tight end in this draft. You've watched Brevin Jordan or Tommy Tremble, two different players. But you'll fall in love with either of them. And I just don't understand. Until this team, someone asked if you sign a left tackle and a corner, are you okay with Pitts at 13? I mean, I guess, but are you show me, I suppose. I don't know. Again, I've been on now that they have their left guard, I think, let's go with left tackle at 13. Let's just make this the cornerstone. Let's not pay Trent Williams $23 million. Let's get a good left tackle, granted unproven, and pay him $16 million, $17 million over the next 4 years. And you get him on a fifth-year option as well, rather than pay someone a ridiculous amount of money. So, Tyler Poore. Hey, Tyler, another Tyler. I'm in love with Jordan. He's so good. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Sam Tevy wasn't horrible.
Tevy was borderline serviceable. I agree, but that's the thing is if you're trying to protect Justin Herbert, you want the best offensive line possible, and so. If my choices in the draft, if you tell me that I have to take a left tackle and a tight end in the first 2 rounds, and my choices are Kyle Pitts and Alex Leatherwood, or Christian Darrisaw, or Elijah Vera Tucker, Rashawn Slater, and Brevin Jordan, I'm taking that second option. I'm taking the better left tackle, and then hoping that Brevin Jordan can develop into a generational kind of talent, because Kyle Pitts, he is an amazing player. The things you can do with him are awesome. That's also why he's probably not going to be there at 13, right? Because, I could make an argument. I'll make a flow chart if you want me to. Do you need a quarterback? Yes. Then you don't take Kyle Pitts. Do you not need a quarterback? No. Then you take Kyle Pitts. Are you the Cincinnati Bengals? Yes. Then you take Penei Sewell. If you're if you're any other team, you should probably take Kyle Pitts.
Yeah. I think you guys are very nice for entertaining the thought. But I don't think Kyle Pitts is going to be there at 13. I think someone's going to take him, whether it's the Falcons, the Eagles, another team that's in that top 10. The Cowboys, the Cowboys fucking love taking whoever the sexiest player is, and then just riding it out and figuring everything else out later. Jerry Jones would run to the podium to take Kyle Pitts and pair him with CeeDee Lamb and all those guys, right? So I like Kyle Pitts, and I agree with people that he's a generational talent. But I think the reality is you'd probably have to trade up for Kyle Pitts, at least to number, let's say, 8 in the draft or somewhere around there. And I think you're giving up capital in a year where it's not smart to do that. So in that sense, I'm kind of out on Kyle Pitts if, I have to trade up for him. And tight end isn't that big of a need. I know we just lost Hunter Henry, so it's crazy to say that, but the needs on this team at quarterback and offensive line are still bigger, even with Hunter Henry leaving.
Yeah. And I would argue that they need another pass rusher more than they need a tight end. Honestly, I would. Two quick ones. Somebody asked about Dylan Radunes. I love Dylan Radunes. I think he's going to be a first-round player, especially after the way that he went down at the Senior Bowl. He's got everything that teams look for in terms of like that second tier of offensive tackle. I wouldn't take him at 13, but if the Chargers could trade down to like 20, 21, then I would honestly be okay with taking Dylan Radunes at that point. Like that's how highly I think people around the league think of him. Somebody asked about Eric Fisher. Eric Fisher just tore his Achilles, which means he's done in the NFL. It's not happening. Achilles injuries are so hard to come back from, especially when you're a 30-year-old offensive lineman who weighs 320 pounds. Eric Fisher's not. Could he be a serviceable player? Sure, but he's done being an above-average player. I'm not interested in taking that kind of chance because he will be expensive. Like he'd probably cost as much as Alejandro Villanueva, and I'm just not interested in that one.
Also, if you sign Eric Fisher, like he just tore his Achilles, right,
and it was late in the season,
right?
It was
right
late
before
in
the
the
Super Bowl.
season.
Yeah, that's the thing I was saying. Like, you don't know if he's going to be ready by week 1, right? He might not be ready till week 6 or 7, and it really takes a full year after the injury until. I mean, we saw this with Hunter Henry. Like, it takes a full year after the ACL or the Achilles. Until these players are, really, 100%, especially with football. Kevin Durant in the NBA is a special case because, he's a freak.
It's basketball,
Yeah, but that's basketball. Football, you just said like a 320-pound tackle, having to rehab his Achilles, it ain't happening.
Yeah. So Clinton Sims said, I know offensive line at 13 should be the pick, but if Slater and maybe Elijah Vera-Tucker are gone before 13, I wouldn't hate Ojulari in the first and Little Hudson in the second. He says, I'm not that high on Cosme. So Azeez Ojulari, I said this earlier this morning after he tested. The dude has freakishly long arms. I think it was like 34 3/8 or something like that. Daniel Popper had a good time like taking out a tape measure, he said. And so I've said this a couple times, but if the Chargers do not want an offensive lineman in the first round, say Slater is off the board and they kind of view Elijah Vera-Tucker as a guard, which I think is possible, then I think Azeez Ojulari would be my selection because for me, the value of an edge rusher, a top tier edge rusher, is so much greater than a cornerback. You look at last year's draft class, the 3 best corners were taken in the second round. Jalen Johnson, my guy. You had what's his name, Darnay Holmes, who was probably the second best in the 4th round, and then the 5th round was L'Jarius Sneed, who was probably the 3rd best. So it's so much easier to find like a true impact cornerback later in the draft than it is an edge rusher. And so a lot of people have said like, well, they have a Uchenna Nwosu, they don't really need an edge rusher. For me, like I'm not going to turn down a top tier pass rusher if I have to. Like I would still prefer the offensive line, but I think for me, like it's easily you take an edge rusher if you're not taking an offensive lineman.
Yeah, and I think you take probably edge rusher if you're not taking offensive lineman. The only argument that I would have towards that is potentially cornerback. I've said that a couple times, but I think that's actually, for me, I think cornerback is a little bit bigger need than edge right now. But I think you could probably argue either way. But yeah, it also depends on the draft classes. And I know Steven has said he likes the edge class, or no, Steven has said he likes the cornerbacks later better. I've said that I like the edges later better. So it really depends on your personal view on like what position groups you think will be left later. But the only 3 positions I can really see them taking in the first round right now, barring some dramatic player falling or something, is really cornerback, offensive line, and edge, like you said.
Yeah, it'll be offensive line because, like you said, the edge class and the corner class are pretty good. And I think in the second round, I think as you get later, it might become a problem. But in that second round, you're going to get some really good defensive value there. Again, not a first round starter, but a pretty good, solid guy. What the hell are we talking about? I read someone's comment, and I'm just like,
Yeah,
I completely forgot what I was talking about.
Chargers fan 21 brought up Deontay Smith, and I think this is an interesting thing because we've kind of talked about them maybe getting a defensive starter in the second round, and I think that's probably going to be the case. A corner or an edge rusher or maybe a linebacker with how things have panned out. A safety, get some safety help. So for me, I think taking Deontay Smith in the third round is the perfect situation, right? You get him to sit behind Bulaga. James Hudson, if he's there, would be another kind of situation, or Jalen Moore from Western Michigan. I don't think Walker Little will be there, but that would be a dream situation. You get Walker Little in the third round and have him develop. So I like that situation a lot. Getting your left tackle of the future in the first round, getting your right tackle of the future in the third round to sit for a year behind Brian Bulaga. Yeah. And then that gets them a lot of options. I think Deontay Smith especially would be fantastic because he played guard as well at the Senior Bowl, had a lot of flexibility there. And then you have Matt Filer, who also has some guard tackle flexibility. So I think that would be a very smart situation for the Chargers to do.
A couple people have asked this in the chat, so I guess I'll pose it to you guys. Do you think that the Chargers are done spending in free agency, or do you think there's more moves on the way?
Define spending. If you mean big moves, probably, but I think wrote tennis. Andrew, thanks a lot. No, that's my girlfriend. She does tennis. Anyway, no, I don't think they're done spending. They can't be done spending. They have so many holes to fill. Their offensive line is 6 people, and I know you only need 5, but you kind of need more than that eventually because it's the Chargers, folks. You're going to need about 13 on your roster. And you're going to go through all of them. So, are they done spending? No, obviously not. They do need some guys, and some guys will return. I don't know what's up with Tai Long. He's a free agent, right? But yeah, no, they're not done spending. But I don't think there's a whole lot of big moves left. I'm shocked. I am really disappointed they weren't interested in Reddick, or he didn't sign Reddick. But yeah, Troy Hill is still in play, and until until he signs somewhere else, I always think he's going to be in play.
Yeah, I think they'll sign a secondary piece. I feel like if they get Troy Hill or Craig Smith. What if the Chargers give the second for Jackson, find a trade partner in the first to move back to later in the first, get Redunes and recoup the lost second? My man, you're preaching to the choir here. I think that would be an amazing situation.
Yeah.
You get JC Jackson, what was that stat you found, Tyler? He's got 30 interceptions over the last 3 years or something like that?
I wish he had 30 interceptions. I don't think they'd be going if he had 30 interceptions and 17 interceptions.
That was an exaggeration.
But it might as well be. 17,
pretty much.
Yeah.
More interceptions than anyone on the Chargers had in the last 3 years, probably.
I know Melvin Ingram almost paced the team last year for 6 weeks. I've entertained that idea a lot that Craig brought up. I've done it in the Draft Network. I've done a stupid thing like trade back with a team and then trade up with the Saints or something like that. But I've always gone for an edge rusher kind of guy because I do think there's a sweet spot where a couple of edge rushers could be sitting in the 20s. But I do like that too. I do like the idea of trading back and trading up. And why not? You can trade up and accumulate some value, accumulate some picks, and you still have ammo already to trade up too. So I think they'd be at a good spot to do that for sure.
Craig said, "Ta-da!" I love that. But yeah, I'm a big fan of trading down, man. I think it's just so smart, especially this year when you have, the cap decrease going down. You have all these roster holes. So trading down makes sense, and it's. Adam Schefter seems to think that there's going to be 5 quarterbacks taken in the top 10, which would include Mac Jones. If he's hearing that, I think we kind of have to talk about it. But, if they're sitting at 13 and Mac Jones is still on the board, then, I think you call Chicago, you call Washington and be able to trade back. I think that's a good situation. So all of us.
Why would you call Chicago? They have Andy Dalton and Nick Foles.
Andy Dalton. So let's get those prayer circles going that Mac Jones falls and is on the board at 13, because I think that's the perfect situation for the Chargers. Then they can trade back. And then you could get, I don't know. I'm a big fan of Tevin Jenkins, man. I think Tevin Jenkins is being slept on. I think if you could trade back and get 19, and I do think that Tevin Jenkins could play left tackle. I think that would be awesome. Or like I said, Dylan Redunes as well. But trading back would just be an amazing situation.
I'd go for Tevin Jenkins after you trade back. And if it doesn't work and you have to move him to right tackle, that's okay because you're probably getting rid of Brian Bulaga next year anyhow.
Yeah.
That's like a really high upside James Hudson kind of play where you have that first round talent. And, play him behind Bulaga or play him at left tackle, switch him over. It doesn't work. If it does work, great. I love it. I love Tevin Jenkins if you trade back.
All right. So we'll answer a couple more questions. So if you want to get some questions in, make sure and ask them right away. Somebody asked about Melvin Ingram on a 1-year deal, and Chargers fan 21 also asked about Jadeveon Clowney. So we talked about Melvin Ingram last time. I think the longer he stays on the market, I think the longer it remains a possibility that he comes back to the Chargers. Jadeveon Clowney, I think that would be a really good addition for their run defense because Jadeveon Clowney is one of the better run defenders in terms of edge rushers, but I don't know, what does he cost? Really, because I think people that are signing Jadeveon Clowney are always going to talk themselves into, he was a first-round pick. He was, the number 1 overall pick. He's got all these crazy athletic tools. And so I think Jadeveon Clowney would cost, I don't know. Hassan Reddick just signed for $8 million. So what do I know? But I'm not super interested in Jadeveon Clowney.
Yeah, if it's between Jadeveon Clowney and Melvin Ingram, I'd probably lean towards just bringing Melvin Ingram back on a 1-year deal. I think that's what he's going to get anyway. I don't know if there's, like Steven said, the longer it goes and the Chargers have fewer edge options in free agency, and Melvin Ingram, because edges keep getting snatched up, he has fewer options in free agency. I think it's likely. I would honestly say it's likely now that he probably goes back to the Chargers on a 1-year deal, and then in the draft, or you can make some other moves. You get your long-term starter there. But honestly, I think it's kind of mutually beneficial because for Melvin Ingram, right, he's on a 1-year deal, has a better year than he did last year, isn't injured, right? Then that puts him in play for 2022 free agency, and then the other thing would just be. What do you want to do, I guess, past him, right? That, this year allows you time to figure out what you want to do. So I kind of think at this point, with the way the edge market is going, it's kind of beneficial for both parties. Now, the question is...
Oh, did we lose him?
We'll never know what the question is.
The question is, we don't know. Alex froze up. So... that's an interesting conversation. I do think Melvin Ingram on a 1-year deal would make a lot of sense. I think he would make a lot of sense on a bunch of teams. Somebody asked, Andrew Hernandez jokingly said, no, I'm not saying Mac Jones at 13, Andrew. But he did ask about Marquise Goodwin for wide receiver 3 was released by the 49ers today. I think if you're taking Marquise Goodwin, I'm not super into that idea because they already have Jalen Guyton and Tyron Johnson who are filling the exact same role that Marquise Goodwin would do. To me, the only receiver that I think would free agent that I think, you're kind of interested in is somebody that could come in and fill a variety of roles. Curtis Samuel is still out there. I think Curtis Samuel would make a lot of sense in terms of what they're looking for that could fill different things. But I'm not super interested in Marquise Goodwin. Somebody asked about Will Fuller earlier. Again, somebody that's injured all the time is not somebody the Chargers should be looking into.
Yeah, and he's not even going to play the first 8 games. He's suspended, isn't he?
I think he's suspended for the first 2.
Because he already sat out games?
Yeah, I think he already sat out games at the end of last year.
I think so.
Gotcha.
Alex is back.
Oh, I don't know. My internet went out for a quick second, but yeah, so I sort of heard the end of that.
Oh, Morgan Fox just signed with the Panthers? That's interesting. That is kind of weird that, we haven't seen any Staley guys come over yet. I still think, Troy Hill is a serious possibility, but it's a little weird that there weren't any Rams holdovers. Even the coaching staff, it was what's his name? Joe Barry, and that was pretty much it. So maybe he was just is kind of wanting his own fresh start.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's certain things that we overestimated and underestimated. I think, the idea of, Leonard Floyd or John Johnson coming was fun, but I don't know how likely that was just because Staley was here. It just depends on what Telesco wants to do in free agency mostly, and I'm sure Staley has some input on that. And then the other thing is, I think we underestimated just how much change there would be a little bit with all the contracts that were given out, and Perriman leaving, and Vigil leaving, and Henry leaving. I didn't quite expect that much change.
Someone says maybe Staley thinks they stunk.
No, seriously, I was thinking. I mean,
it's
look,
possible.
Staley was at the Rams, but for a year. It's not like he was super committed to them for so long. So, I mean, again, most of these guys aren't really highly touted, well, except for Donald and Floyd and whatnot. But they weren't like Troy Hill's not like an elite talent. Well, he is, but not elite. But I mean, it's not like he was brought in up to the Rams as an elite talent, or John Johnson was a 3rd round pick. So maybe he just thinks he can get it done with other guys.
Yeah. And that's the thing. We've seen more, honestly, tangible connections to Staley's Denver days than we've seen tangible connections to his Rams days, right? Obviously that would come this year, but I think it's just Staley's going to pick the players he wants, and he watches tape, I'm sure, on the whole rest of the NFL. So, I'm sure he has his guys that he likes, both former Rams, former Broncos, and not that also.
I'm just seeing now that the Cincinnati Bengals offered Kenny Golladay a 1-year prove it type of deal.
Okay,
that's interesting. That's bold. Oh man,
It works. It works.
Hey man, talk about a team that's not really doing anything. They signed a bunch of defensive players, but the defense wasn't the problem. The offensive line was the problem. So I'm a little confused about that. So, all right.
I'm interested to see how AJ Green does in Arizona. I think that's actually a pretty good signing. It was kind of weird to see that move come from the Cardinals, because that AJ Green veteran type move, that feels like such a Belichick kind of move. And Belichick, meanwhile, is spending $13 million on Nelson Aguilar. So it was just it was really weird to see that move come from the Cardinals and not Patriots type thing.
Yeah. So why are people talking about Josh Oliver
Josh Oliver got traded from the Jaguars to the Ravens conditional draft pick.
Oh, I don't know.
Never heard of him. Is it
2019 3rd rounder?
I thought what Rogue Tiefling was saying, that they were talking about the political TV guy.
John Oliver.
John Oliver. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking
Matt Prater has signed with the Cardinals.
Oh.
Okay.
Interesting.
I would have liked him on the Chargers, to be honest.
Well, you can't bring him in for a kicking competition now, so It's just going to be Vizcaino and Badgley for now.
Yeah. All right. So somebody asked about Juju as well. I think that's kind of how I'll wrap it up. Yeah, that's that was quick, Tyler. Like I said, I feel like they need somebody who does a variety of roles, right? They don't need a slot guy, which is what Juju is, because they have Keenan Allen who can do that, and they like working Jalen Guyton in the slot. So I think, to me, I just think it makes too much sense to draft a rookie. I'm not super interested in paying another wide receiver, right? Because you have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams with really high cap hits, and then you had Juju for $12 million, and you have $33 million tied into the receiver group. I'm just not, or that'd be 43 actually. I can do math. I'm just not super interested in that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in a theoretical world where they cut Mike Williams, for some reason people thought they were going to do today, but not even that. In that situation, I'd rather have Kenny Golladay than Juju if we're talking about replacing Mike Williams. I just think I like Juju. I think he's a great route runner, but you already have your top 2 receivers on this team for this year, and you fill out the rest of the holes later. That's what you do with receiver. You can either draft a receiver 3rd, 4th, 5th round if you want to do that, or you sign, sort of a high upside, low buy guy. I think that's what you do. But spending big money on Juju Smith-Schuster, I just don't really see the point in it.
If the entire market can drive down the price of Juju, perhaps he certainly would be an upgrade at wide receiver 3. But most of the NFL, we're kind of laughing at the Patriots for signing a bunch of randos or overpaying for Nelson Aguilar, and the rest of the NFL, as a couple of reporters are saying, they're saying nobody's calling these wide receivers, and that's largely because of the draft they're about to go into. And so if the rest of the NFL is not signing these receivers, clearly they view the strength of the draft or part of it being wide receiver. So why be the person that, spends a bunch of money on receivers? You're not smarter by doing, what everybody else isn't doing. Wait for your receiver, and there's going to be plenty of them.
Yeah, I would have liked, like a cheap flyer on somebody. Like I think, Kendrick Bourne at a more reasonable price than what he actually signed for would have made some sense. But I'm not super interested in paying a receiver when you have, like I said, these two, expensive receivers. So somebody said nobody wants the TikToker. Yeah. So I just think the money that the Chargers have would be better spent elsewhere. Like we said, they need a secondary piece. They probably need an edge rusher. They need another interior offensive lineman. So I just think that would make sense. Zach, I see you with the Jamin Davis conversation, man. I honestly have not gotten to the linebackers yet on my rewatch outside of like the big three. But I think rotating Jamin Davis at Murray at linebacker or at edge and linebacker wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. I think you keep those two off the ball and take advantage of that athleticism. But I see you.
Breaking news. Houston has made a trade. PJ Tucker to Milwaukee.
You bastard. That's a good trade, though, man.
The second you opened your mouth, but
that's a good trade. That is actually a really good trade for the Milwaukee Bucks. I like that trade a lot. All right, so we will make sure and keep you guys posted about when we are doing the jersey giveaway. But like I said, if you already typed the name in, then we have your entry, and we will keep you guys posted. So thank you for tuning in, guys. Any other thoughts before we wrap up today?
Yeah, I actually have a thought. I saw this on Twitter. I saw this people commenting it. It's like the comment thought has been, why is Telesco waiting to make moves? Both on Twitter and in the chat. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, Telesco he waits. But Telesco just signed Corey Linsley to a 5-year, $63 million deal. Like, that was a move we all wanted. That was what we were kind of waiting for. He just signed another offensive lineman in Filer, and he re-signed Michael Davis. Like, he's not going, super slow, in my opinion. He's waited a couple days, but a lot of the free agency's kind of been slow the last 2 days. I mean, in comparison to how it was on Monday. So I don't think he's actually been missing out on too much in a way. And then the other thing I would say is, like moving a lot in free agency and making a lot of moves is fun. I'm sure you would see an uptick in podcast downloads, and we would see that, and we would see an uptick in, whatever articles we're writing and how many clicks they get. But, as we've seen, like, dumb money has been spent in free agency. And personally, I think the Patriots are kind of the team that's spending dumb money right now that might come back to bite them at some point. So I just think sometimes you have to look at free agency a little bit slower, and there's still a lot of quality guys on the board that the Chargers can't sign.
Yeah, and I'm actually kind of surprised to see Louis Riddick give the Patriots so much props for spending this money. Granted, I do think the tight ends will fit their system. If they want to run that 2 tight end system, that's fine. I just think overpaying for a bunch of other receivers and a couple other players is not the route to go at all. As far as waiting, it's fine. Be patient. Yesterday, we didn't know that Adoree Jackson was going to be available. He is now.
That's true.
Today, we find out that Fuller from the Bears is going to potentially be available. He is now. We know that now. So the longer we wait, the more cap you accumulate, or not accumulate, but don't spend, the more you can pounce on some of these guys. And if you can, and the other thing is, maybe they don't really view the Chargers. The Chargers don't view themselves as contenders this year. They shouldn't. Of course, your goal is to win, but there's not like a win now sort of thing. I really think if they're going to make that trade for Orlando Brown one day, granted it won't be Orlando Brown, or to take sign a bunch of really expensive free agents, or have the really good players sign on your really good team, that's not till next year. And so I think they'll do enough, build the team. It's going to take some years for Staley to get his guys. Clearly he has a fingerprint on this team, or he wants to put his fingerprint on the team. So it'll take some time. So I don't think they're really going to do a whole lot from here on out. Just be patient and trust that the staff will get things done. Someone asked us for a record prediction.
It's March.
No. We don't even know how many games they'll be playing next year. They might be playing 16 games. They might be playing 17 games. I don't even know the order of the schedule. Wait till like May when we have no content.
Yeah. Yes. So here's how I'm going to wrap this up, because I've been spending all day watching Packers film. The Chargers just signed the best center in the league. Like, I am firmly confident in saying that. Like, it was such a big upgrade for the Chargers. Like, Tom Telesco has not done nothing, right? Like, he signed the best center in the league, and I think that's going to be a huge upgrade. Matt Filer is going to be a big upgrade. And they checked their 3 biggest boxes. We knew that they needed to sign 2 starting caliber offensive linemen, and they did that. We knew that one of those offensive linemen had to be an elite option, and they did that. And we knew that they had to re-sign Michael Davis, and they did that. So I understand. I would love to sit here and be talking about more things today. I would have loved that. But I think people who are frustrated at the lack of moves don't really understand how good Corey Linsley is going to be for this team. And obviously, he has to stay healthy. He has to be on the field. But if he stays on the field and he plays all 5 years, he will easily be the best free agent signing of Tom Telesco's tenure. And so, go ahead, Alex.
I was just going to say the other thing is, like, Telesco's always been one of these people that, like, kind of deals in the darkness, and he doesn't really, like, say anything to anyone, right? So, like, when you see these NFL reporters, like, tweeting stuff, it's usually, like, the Chargers just come in at the last minute, and then they do something, right? Yeah. Right before they sign a guy. Like, we saw that with Corey Linsley, right? Like, we thought they would be interested, but we really received no confirmation that they were interested in Corey Linsley till 10 minutes before he decided to sign. Like, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. And the other one, I guess, is, like Chris Harris last year. Like, no one had any, idea Chris Harris was going to sign with the Chargers. Then he's in consideration with the Raiders and the Eagles, and he picks the Chargers, right? I just think Tom Telesco's kind of always been like that, and the Chargers as a franchise have been like that, to the point where you don't really know what they're going to do, and they'll let you know when they let you know.
Yeah, and I'd much rather be, the Chargers or a Chargers fan finding out when I find out than be the Bears thinking that they were for Russell Wilson and they get a notification about Andy Dalton. Like, I'd rather just not know what we were hoping to get, and just, find out what we do get, because they were like, yeah, Russell Wilson, and then Andy Dalton. I mean, how deflating is that? You can't even look forward to your season, and it's March, and that's just for not getting somebody. And so I would rather kind of be ignorance is bliss.
Hey, man, not just Russell Wilson. They thought they were getting Trent Williams, too, man. Like, they thought they were getting the best left tackle and one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the league, and they ended up with Jermaine Ifedi and Andy Dalton. So,
man,
I just think people are really underrating, how good Corey Linsley is right now. I'm going to do a film breakdown on him that should be posting in the next couple of days. I've been so impressed with the way that he plays football and what he's going to bring to this team, and be able to handle all of the communication errors that have been plaguing the Chargers offensive line for the last 4 years. So that's going to do it for us, guys. Like I said, if you comment to the name, we will be able to get your entry in for the jersey entry, and then we'll keep you guys posted there. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been great. It's been an hour and 15 minutes. I think that was about 20 minutes longer than I thought our last one was. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
See you.
Bye.